Students, I'll call the order. Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Councilwoman Law, I'd like to do an optional prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let us pray. We are a world that is lost and fallen, a bruised humanity where violence seems to be a given, where people are oppressed. We long to know peace throughout the world. The people are filled with dread. No justice is found. No peace is in sight. We will fight battles to turn things around as we are creatures of peace. Let us not forget to defend the defenseless, stand up for the powerless. We yearn for harmony again. It is a battle that we will win. As we long to know peace, let us stand up for the powerless and defend the defenseless. Let us not forget it is not too late for us to recreate a world where justice reigns. We can imagine justice that circles around the earth, a world that we are doing our best to restore with good foundation. We offer our praise to our Lord and work to bring justice. Amen.
Amen. Mr. Smith, would you please do roll call?
Mr. Brenneman?
Here.
Mr. DiMatteo?
Here.
Mrs. Fatico?
Here.
Dr. Faust?
Here.
Mr. Leone? Mrs. Law?
Here.
Chairman Horton?
Here. Item 4 on the agenda. If you see that we have people here this evening, if you're following along with the agenda, there's some extra ones in the back there if you didn't pick one out for the students. But we're at the point where we do hearing of the public. If for those who have called in, which we have 2 tonight, they'll be allotted 5 minutes. And for anyone else who wishes to approach the podium for the hearing of the public, we'll allot you 3 minutes. And the first person on the list tonight is Mr. Edison Nicholson, the Executive Director of Global Youth Leadership Institute of Erie. Yes, sir.
Hello.
Guess you got to project your voice a bit.
Hello,
Yeah,
my name is
sorry about
Edison Nicholson. I'm the director of the Youth Leadership Institute of Erie, and I have some of my students here today. If you guys can come on up.
You're going to speak after
Okay.
you and I.
All right. I didn't know I was on the agenda, but we're here today to talk about the Global Youth Service Day. It's an international day of service for young people all across the globe that will be involved on April 16th of this year. And we're going to be doing some exciting things, and we just want to present this to you and hopefully get your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nix. Next on the list is Crystal Lepak, also from Global Youth Service Day.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Crystal Lepak, and I am the Youth Program Coordinator for Global Youth Service Day this year for the Youth Leadership Institute. The Youth Leadership Institute is the lead agency for Youth Service America, and one of our big events put on by our SALT team, our Student Ambassador Leadership team, is Global Youth Service. And as Edison had said, it is global. So we're talking over 135 countries worldwide, their youth. It's youth-ran, youth-led, one of the only ones in the nation. And the youth pick the projects, they go out, they see the need, and they pick the topics that they want to do. For here in Erie and Erie County, our youth have chosen to tackle 5 issues that they are very concerned about: the veterans, the elderly, special needs, children and youth, homelessness and hunger, and the environment. Now, this is a big undertaking for kids grades 6 through 12 who are planning this big event. So we are going to mobilize 500 to 1,000 youth just in our Erie and Erie County alone to go out and do these service learning projects. And when I say service learning projects, I'm not talking about community service where we're going to go in and clean a bathroom or run a sweeper. We're talking engaging with the people that are part of our communities and the issues that are at hand right now. So the kids are going to be doing a few things. Here's what we're going to be doing in Erie. We're going to be going to the Soldiers and Sailors Home, and we're going to be doing some gardening projects. We're going to interact with their clients, play some games for like a physical therapy kind of fun and fit kind of day. We're also undertook from Ambit Energy, they did a donation for us, and they took in products, non-perishable products and hygiene products that we are going to go and donate now to the Liberty House. They were very moved by the veterans and the elderly, and there seems to be that disconnection to our youth these days that we used to have when we were growing up. And it's often forgotten, and we want to try to make that connection back with our veterans, with the elderly, because there's so much there. They paved the way so many times for us that the factories alone that my grandparents used to work in, I don't want to do something like that. I'm happy with what I'm doing actually, and I have the passion for it. I just love working with youth. I love teaching kids. And this is going to be a great day for our youth all over Erie and Erie County to interact with their communities, because the youth have a voice, and they don't feel like they do have a voice because of their age, and they don't feel like that what they say matters. So that we give them that outlet on this one day. All these youth go out and they show their voice in what they do. Actions speak louder than words. Well, these kids are going out and they are acting. They are giving back to these communities, having clothing drives and canned food drives and giving back to shelters and seeing the need, special needs. We're going to have a fun and fit day and bowl with some kids with special needs and just show them that, that there is that camaraderie there, that you see the person and not the chair. And they're going to be going out and doing coastal cleanup at Presque Isle because they care about their environment. So we're going to go all throughout Erie and Erie County, and this is our 5th year doing it, that we've been nationally recognized now, that Erie is one of the top 16 cities, contending with LA and New York, and so hopefully they'll get that Skype from First Lady Obama during our celebration. So we invite you all to come out during that day, and I have a packet for each one of you, and I'd like to present that if I may. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the service.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to speak from the public? Yes, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to make it to the county council meeting. So as we all know, service is an essential part of our community, and that's why I'm here today. My name's Alan, and I'm the president of the Youth Leadership Institute of Erie. So what makes our program special is its commitment to service by young teenagers all across our city. So our program focuses on service, learning, and leadership, in which we apply concepts we learn from school into the real world. So by doing so, we can impact a lot of students in the community itself. So our mission statement is to develop high school students into leaders who are informed and motivated and making the community better. So we go through an 8-week leadership development training class, and then after that, students are eligible to join the Student Ambassador Leadership Team. We analytically address a lot of the critical issues that our community faces. How many of you know about the hunger issue we're having? How almost a fourth of the children in Erie sometimes struggle to get food? How many know about the teen violence that's going around in our city? Or what about education and drug trafficking? Our program provides insight to all of these issues from young people like myself. So our team of 5 different committees, executive board members, directors, and committee officers work together to address these issues. As president and head of the Student Ambassador Leadership Team, I hope to encourage more students across our area to join the leadership class next year. I also plan to expand our influence in the community by working with a lot more businesses, nonprofits, and other key community leaders in the Erie area. So finally, the Youth Leadership Institute of Erie is also the backbone of the Global Youth Service Day in Erie. On April 16th this year, we're focusing on 5 different issues that we've identified that might be very important to us. such as giving thank you cards to veterans, cleaning up Presque Isle, and beyond that. All right, to wrap everything up, I wanted to end with my favorite quote by Gandhi, a civil rights activist from India. He said the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. Through the Youth Leadership Institute, I found myself. I was able to broaden my horizons and see so much of what I could do to help make our community better. Once again, I would strongly commend everyone for listening to what we have to say. We're letting you know that we're taking action actively within our community, and your support towards our program, the Erie community, and service is irreplaceable. So once again, I'm really honored to represent our organization tonight as the president of the Youth Leadership Institute, and I'm more excited than ever for the Global Youth Service Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Anyone else? Right up.
Good evening. My name is Abigail Marlino, and I am the Service Learning Committee Chair for the SALT team. And I would like to talk about one of the topics that we are going to be focusing on for Global Youth Service Day, and that would be hunger and homelessness. And for a couple of the projects we're going to be doing, we are going to be making homemade goods for Umeå Soup Kitchen, because a lot of homeless people don't get the homemade food and homemade goods that, we're so used to getting on, say, Easter's coming up, so we're used to that ham and all the good food, and they're not used to that. So we are going to be making homemade chocolate chip cookies and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I'd also like to say that I don't know a lot of the solutions or any solutions for hunger, because they're hard to come up with. But I would like to go and speak to people who are frequent visitors to Umeå Soup Kitchen or the City Mission and see what they would suggest to be done to really help them out. And I would also like to take the SALT team to do this as well and really get us out there and become part of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Abigail.
Thank you.
I could help facilitate that for you through Mr. Nichols. I used to be the interim director over at the upper room, and having been homeless before myself, I still eat at Umeå Soup Kitchen. I never want to get too far away from that, and so anytime your group wants to do any of that stuff, we'll certainly reach out to us, and we'll facilitate that happening for you. Anyone else? Well, I'd like to thank you for coming. It's always good. We invite you to come down and see how democracy works. There being no one else for the hearing of the public, we'll move to item 5, which is the minutes from the previous meeting.
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
It's been properly moved by Dr. Faust and seconded by Councilman Brenneman to accept the minutes from the previous meeting. Are there any questions or comments? We do roll call, sir.
Mr. Brenneman,
Yes.
Mr. DiMatteo.
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
Yes.
Mrs. Lahl,
Yes.
Chairman Horton.
Yes. Item 6, reports of county officials. Madam County Exec, would you have any reports or comments you'd like to make this evening?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. First of all, I have to commend these young people and the entire Institute for really doing great work. And I think, we hear the bad things out there, but we know that 95% of our children are doing really great things. And I'd say these children behind us are at the top of some of those lists. So I just want to congratulate you all on what you're doing. I just wanted to report on a couple things. Today, we finished a pilot project that we started with one representative from the different departments that are underneath me called Ice House, and it's a leadership program. And so we had these people come together for 6 weeks, and one of the great things that everyone said was they got to meet people from other departments. You know, our county tends to be so siloed, particularly since we're in often different buildings. People don't know what the health department does, or what public safety does, or what we're doing over at the prison, and so forth. And so these people got to come together, and then they got to actually use their own creative, innovative internal abilities to look at some issues, look at some problems, and come up with creative solutions. And so today they presented the solutions to me, but it wasn't just about presenting the solutions and kind of putting them on the administration's lap. It was about how they can help move things along. And I was really encouraged by what I saw and by the fact that these people want to try to continue to take that, what they learned, into solving the problems throughout their departments. And so I think this is maybe the beginning of something bigger where we can actually continue to bring our employees together in this very collaborative, integrated way. And I think that there's a lot of collaboration between departments that we've been trying to encourage, but when you get the employees really engaged in this, we can see more ways that all of our departments can work together with the resources they have to create something bigger. And that's really, our resources are not going up, and so we have to use our resources obviously more efficiently, and I know that there's overlap sometimes and we can actually create something bigger. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, let you know about it, and know you'll probably hear more going forward, but it was very encouraging today. Secondly, I want to tell you about, that I mentioned I am one of the NACO representatives, the National Association of County Representatives, going with the National League of Cities to a heroin opioid epidemic task force. The first meeting will be April 7th in Washington, and what we're looking at is how counties and cities can work more collaboratively to attack this huge epidemic that we're seeing across our country. And so I've continued to have a lot of conversations around Erie County and in the state in general to make sure that Pennsylvania's issues and messages taken to that task force, and I will report back to you once I've been to this first meeting, and there'll be another meeting in June, and then we'll finish up in the fall. And then lastly, I went last week to Harvard with the City of Erie. Kathy Rosdick, the Director of Planning, myself, and 4 members, the mayor included, from the City of Erie to look at how we can deal with blight issues. Now, this was focused on the city, but one of the things that Kathy Rosdick and I brought to that was that so many of these issues really go beyond the City of Erie, and we need to look at some of these solutions as being, how do we deal with this as a county? So we started some good conversations. I think we have some thoughts of plans of how to go forward, and again, I'll be coming in front of you once we kind of have that a little more ironed out, but it was a good workshop. I think there was a lot of positive progress being made, and it's something that I'm sure we're all concerned about, and how we can, with our, particularly our aging housing stock, and knowing the blight next door to you affects your own property, and it's really about the people. It's not about the building, it's about the neighborhood, and it's about the people, and that was really the focus, and that's so key for us all to remember. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam County Exec. Can we have the Finance Committee report, Dr. Faust?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Last Thursday, council met as the Finance Committee and agreed to put on tonight's agenda for a second reading, ordinance number 19, which is in regard to restricting the gaming fund budget for grant funding to EMTA. Also, to go scheduled for first readings, but to move with a proper vote tonight to a second reading, ordinances number 20 and 21 regarding a district data processing line item and also a justice assistance grant for the public safety radio project. Also to put on for first reading tonight, ordinance number 22 regarding supplemental appropriation for increased county wellness activities here within the courthouse and for our county employees. A possible adoption of resolution number 9, which is for a project at the Barber Center not to exceed $2,800,000, and also the possible reappointment of Jerry Nawara to a 4-year term as the East County representative. That actually represents the territories of Mr. DiMatteo and myself. And then finally, possible sale of parcels from repository for the unsold properties according to the index numbers listed in our agenda tonight. And a report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Faust. May we have the Personnel Committee report, Mr. Brenneman?
Mr. Chair, the Personnel Committee met immediately following the Finance Committee. We had no new items discussed. We did discuss ordinance number 18, which is up for old business, and that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Brenneman. Councilwoman Law, what do you have in the report this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the 14th of this month, I attended the Assessment Board meeting. In order to settle the situation about the site center of Northwest Pennsylvania, Scott Moss will visit the property himself, and hopefully this will end the questions about the exemption. There are questions about new businesses or expansion of one, so Awareness Ministries and Maria House will be asked to come in to be questioned. It was discussed, and the new floating bar on a barge at the dock will not be taxed because it is a boat. Surprise to me, I did not know this, but that is the way it is. If you're, so that barge will not be taxed. Then on the 16th of this month, I attended the Drug and Alcohol Advisory Board meeting, and they have been conservative during the fiscal year because of the state budget was not passed, so they have not spent much money. They recently received $5.2 million and do not have the time to spend it responsibly, so they are requesting that the excess amount be held and used in the next budget. They have been mandated to have someone available at all of the 5 emergency rooms 24/7 for the benefit of pregnant mothers and veterans who present with drug and or alcohol or behavioral health needs. There won't be enough money to cover this mandate, so the extra money that they can move into the next budget will come in very handy. They are trying to educate the doctors to limit pain medication by asking for the old unused prescriptions to be turned back and to not write a new prescription until that's received. And also checking if they're getting prescriptions from another doctor also. Also by educating the public when a relative dies, that the unused prescription be turned into the proper authorities. The department has a student assistance program that the majority of the schools are not using because they do not want to admit that they have a district problem with drug and or alcohol or behavioral problems. I suggested that the school resource officers may be in contact to identify and report a student for this service. It is all paid for by the program, and it does not cost the schools anything. I contacted John Loomis, our sheriff, about this, and he was quite receptive and was going to contact the department and get information as to the use of the SRO officers. John called me this afternoon and told me that the guys are well trained in this and that they are willing to follow through with this. Then Saturday, along with Ed DiMatteo, we attended the Erie Edinburgh Fire Department Initiation of Officers Recognition, a members dinner. And then this afternoon, Jay Brenneman and I took a tour of the Courtyard by Marriott at the Bayfront. And that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Law. Councilwoman Fatika, do you have a report?
Yes. I was asked by some constituents to look into training first responders to deal with the population that fall in the autism spectrum. Special considerations are very important with this group. I met with Matthew Exley. He's the Emergency Management Coordinator for Millcrook Township, and Matthew agreed to look into this further. We are aware that something is out there. Pardon me. He's going to be discussing it with other municipalities as well as Erie County Public Safety. And it was also discussed that additional information would be provided to the public through the government access programming. That's the end of my report.
Thank you, Councilwoman Fatika. Mr. DiMatteo, would you have a report this evening?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just real quickly, I've attended numerous meetings in the past couple of weeks, and quite frankly, nothing earth-shattering, except with the exception of last week I did attend the town hall meeting in Union City. Ms. Tufts is an alum of Union City as well. But I think it's noteworthy and incredibly important that we take notice of the following, that without a current budget at the state level for 15-16, around 15 and now moving on to 16-17, Union City, by the first week of June, will have spent all of their cash reserves in addition to the grant money that they received or their infusion back in December. In saying that, all right, if a new budget is not reached, okay, and which obviously pushes back the current budget that was just presented even further into perpetuity, Union City may not open in September. Union City's not going to be alone if this is the case moving forward, and will become a terrible problem statewide and obviously within Erie County. So I think those are things that we all need to be very much aware of. Union City has been very diligent in what they have done just to get to June 2nd, which is their target date, to make sure that the seniors will be able to graduate, okay? You know, many people said, well, geez, why don't we get rid of sports and things like that, you know, to maybe save a few dollars this spring? Well, when you have students who are depending on scholarships because of those spring sports, the school can't do that either. You know, so again, I think it's very important that we all contact our state legislators. We need to be in contact with the governor because, you know, quite frankly, not to be blunt, but you know what? The state budget really hasn't affected many of us. It's affected us here at the county, but the average person who turns on their television every day, state budget hasn't affected them. Until now, you know, many people have said we don't want to use our children as pawns in this, but you know what? That's what's happened, and that's what it's going to become. And now moving forward, people are going to start screaming because it will affect them on a daily basis when your kids can't go to school. Union City's the first one who's come out. You know, it's going to happen elsewhere in Erie County as well as the other counties in Pennsylvania. So, you know, and I'll discuss a little more about that later, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other, Jay, do you have a report, or Dr. Faust? No, we good? I don't have a report, but I do want to comment on the heroin task force. Exec, I am so glad and excited to know that you're going to be participating in that, because every day that I walk into this courthouse, I have the number 62 etched in my mind, and that is Erie County had 62 heroin overdose deaths last year. 62. And I say that in most venues that I go through or I go to because it's a number that none of us should be comfortable with. And so we at the county, we do human services, and I'm an advocate for decriminalizing a lot of the drug laws that would prevent people from seeking help. And as I look at these young people here, I know that none of us are excluded from it, and I think every day I come in, there's 62 sets of parents, there's 62 sets of there's siblings, there's grandparents, there's loved ones, and we hear a lot about the gun violence, but what we don't hear a lot about are the 62 sets of parents who lost their children, many who were bright or had futures, or we don't know how they got there, but never get comfortable with 62. And so I'm excited about with Director Sander and what Director DiMatteo from Human Services are doing, and I am also part of the local heroin task force, and so we can assure the citizens of Erie County that it's a problem that hasn't escaped myself or my colleagues. Thank you. And we'll move on to old business. Mr. Smith, may I have the second reading of ordinance number 18, title only?
The second reading of ordinance number 18 of 2016, 8th 2016 general fund budget, supplemental appropriation of $16,453 for creation of part-time communications and public relations administrator.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilman Brenneman, seconded by Councilman Fatika. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I do not support this ordinance. I made that pretty clear in caucus, in finance a couple weeks ago. You know, we took this position out of the budget as a full-time position last December. This was a position the county had probably about almost 8 years ago now, and at its earliest convenience, county council removed that position from the budget. We just didn't see the utility of it. You know, we are constantly asking departments to do more with less. We've talked about budgetary problems across the state here tonight, and although we have put new positions back in when they're what I would describe as mission critical anyway, and I don't really think this comes close to that. And while I stand by my votes of taking positions out in last December regarding the budget, you know, I think it's easy to make a greater case for putting a diversity position back in. We have a lack of diversity here in Erie County government, I should say. The grant writer's position could lead to some opportunities in health, and the planning positions, I was kind of surprised we took those out, but nevertheless, they were taken out. It can help with the blight issues that Mrs. Dahlkemper talked about tonight. And I just think in the grander scheme of things, even though I wouldn't be in favor of bringing those back, there's an easier justification to make for those positions that they're more mission critical. And in light of having the fact that we raised taxes last December, and that probably won't be the last time, certainly nobody's in favor of doing that often, and the continuing almost endless budget impasse in Harrisburg, which has not stopped visiting this county just yet, as long as there is no budget in place in Harrisburg, I can't see the justification for adding this position, and I encourage my colleagues to vote no. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I guess, and to echo some of the things that Dr. Faust said, but in addition to, as I just spoke about Union City, here's a school district who furloughed 18 teachers and other employees to get to January 2nd. I think it's well noted that, we're asked to do more with less. I would find it very difficult for me to say I support the people of Union City, and then at the same time, unfortunately, we're going to appoint a position here. I just think, again, with what is going on in Harrisburg, and I think part of the point that Dr. Faust said, I think the state budget, we're going to revisit in short order, because again, the rumors that we hear, at least some of the things that I hear, it might not be until November before we have a budget for last year, before we take up the current year. If that's the case, we may be borrowing money again sometime this summer to fulfill our obligations. So at this point, I cannot support this position. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
In careful consideration over this position, I have to take those very points into consideration, that because of the huge impact that county services and county government has on the very well-being of the people in our county, that we need to be able to communicate more effectively and better to our citizens the impact that the financial stalemate and gridlock in Harrisburg has upon our services. I think that alone, if we're able to better communicate that to them, perhaps that helps push along some of these issues in Harrisburg. But also the fact that we are one of the largest employers in the county. We are not, and I'm not saying to add this because of size, but we have we have so many services that impact and people, and too often the county has been hidden. The county, the services that we provide has been unknown. People aren't aware of where their taxpayers' dollars go. They're unaware of the services that are available to them. They're unaware of the issues that we face that impact our ability to serve them. And I think that if we are better able to communicate that, and in my mind, we can always remove this position later if it shows not to be fruitful. But I think we should be willing and to at least extend that option and go from there. And that is all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
I agree that communication is probably the most important thing. We're providing services. People need to be aware of what they are and how they can access them. In addition to making sure that people know what's available and where their tax dollars are going, they also need to know where to get these services and what we can do. So the most important thing I think that we can do is to be able to communicate and have someone whose responsibility is going to be to get the message out.
Yes, ma'am. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, just very quickly, the points of Mrs. Fatika and Mr. Brenneman are well articulated, and I know they're heartfelt. There is no connection between the creation of a part-time communications and public relations administrator and a more educated public. If the things aren't being known, it's not because we don't have one more person in county government to express that message. There's lots of ways that the message is getting out. And so if I happen to lose this vote tonight or come out on the losing side, I should say, I will take Mr. Brenneman up on his challenge that if we don't see the fruits of this position come December, that ought to be removed from the next budget. If, again, it loses tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments? There being none, we're ready for the roll call, the vote.
On ordinance 18, Mr. DiMatteo,
No.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
No.
Mrs. Law,
Yes.
Mr. Brenneman,
Yes.
Chairman Horton.
Yes. Item B, second reading of ordinance number 19. Could you read that in title only, Mr. Smith?
A second reading of ordinance number 19 of 2016, 2016 unrestricted gaming fund budget restriction on grant funding to EMTA.
So moved. Yes, so moved. I'm sorry.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded by Dr. Faust and Councilman DiMatteo. Are there any questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
unlike the last ordinance, I highly encourage my colleagues to support this particular ordinance. The full regionalization of local funding match for EMTA and the board appointments is certainly an issue whose time has come. As I said in an op-ed a few weeks ago, that if we regionalize something and that it's essentially, administered through the county, that doesn't mean that the city somehow loses. This is not a zero-sum game. When the region wins, the city wins as well. And two good examples of this that we've had in the past are 911 services. When, calls come in for 911 services, the city calls are not given any less priority. And as Mr. Brenneman pointed out on a Facebook post a couple weeks ago, county library services are another good example. That at one time, those were basically administered through the school district of the city of Erie. Since they have come under the county's wing, they have not only been stabilized, but expanded and improved over the years. And again, the city has not lost out on that in any particular way. But in this instance, with the local match and the board appointments, if they can become fully regional for the first time, it will allow the city, and for that matter, Mill Creek and Harbor Creek, to pivot and use those resources on more pressing matters. As I mentioned earlier, just yesterday, the mayor was trumpeting a new anti-blight initiative and different measures that are going to be coming forward. To his own admission, the biggest hurdle, or a primary hurdle, to be able to implement those initiatives is funding, is to be able to find funding for that. We are trying to help them find $260,000 extremely quickly with that service, or I would, if I had any say about it, I think I'd use it on more anti-violence measures, but nonetheless, it would be available for them to fund those particular services. And the EMTA issue, as some have argued, is not about buses and routes. It's about how the service will be funded and who will have the accountability of board appointments based on that funding. County government has offered to fully fund the local match now and into the future to stabilize the service. And naturally, if county government or whatever municipality would fully fund the local match, they should have the full say as to who serves on the board. Who else would want it any other way? The way EMTA is currently funded just cobbles together volunteer contributions from a handful of municipalities as well as the county of Erie. Outside of the city of Erie, none of those municipalities are required to contribute anything, and none are required to contribute at any particular level. The city's contribution has gone up and down over the course of 30 years based on what they can afford. What happens in the future if these municipalities decide that our budgets are too tight and we can't afford to contribute for transit services? Those services will be cut. We can't allow such an important service to be held hostage to such an uncertain funding mechanism. The proposal that's on the table from the county does away with this very poor business model. Our ordinance today, if passed, sends yet another clear signal that Erie County government will not continue to fund and participate in the status quo. Let no one believe that Erie County government somehow wants the buses to stop. Far from it. We have included in our 2016 budget sufficient resources to fully fund EMTA throughout this whole year, and we've basically committed to doing that into the future, if we can get to some sort of agreement with the city. That money can be released almost immediately, with a proper vote anyway, if we can engage the city officials and come to some sort of agreement, but they have not responded to our numerous requests through our solicitor, Mr. Tallarico. When the Deputy Secretary for Local and Area Transportation of PennDOT was in town on February 19th, City representatives were invited to that meeting. Not one showed up. Last week, when the solicitors from all interested parties were in town or were asked to meet with Mr. Farver about more political legal issues, again, the city backed out at the last minute. The time for delay is over. Either we reach an agreement or we go our separate ways. The county has stepped up to the plate in good faith. I hope the city does so soon. If our region is to survive and thrive, we need to go about our business in a different and more cost-effective way. The ordinance in front of us is yet another step in that direction, and again, I encourage my colleagues to vote in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Faust. Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Although I don't have a speech prepared that's as articulated as Dr. Faust on, some of the things I like to point out as a city taxpayer myself and as somebody who represents a third of the city along with Mr. Leone and Chairman Horton. When I think that as county council coming and saying, look, we're going to take this regional asset and we're going to have the region pay for it, which by and large is a better it's better financially for all the taxpayers, ourselves and myself included. When city officials, city elected officials have even used that phrase in not that long ago, and yet they fail to do anything towards making that happen, or they rebuff it. It kind of sends a message that perhaps they're all talk and no action. I believe as a city taxpayer, I would hope that those whose, although it's not that high, I know that they don't get paid a whole lot, but apart from the mayor, but I would hope that our taxpayer dollars is going towards, and our time that we took to vote these people in office would mean that we would have some kind of return on our value, or the value of taking that time and effort. So far, we see a ton of gridlock and really failure to move on much of anything in Harrisburg and D.C. I'd really hate to see that happen here at the local level. In the Army, we had a term that we used for this, and it was called sandbagging. That's when you purposely delayed or slowed down. And it wasn't just at the detriment to the team, or in this part, the region and the county. It's really that detriment is to the city and the city officials themselves. They're hurting themselves on this, and they're hurting all the taxpayers in regard to this. Again, there's nothing new, and there's nothing secretive or difficult to understand or comprehend about what we are trying to do here, and yet it has been over a year, and they have failed to even try to negotiate. They haven't even come forward and said, look, we agree with this or we disagree with that. Let's get in a room and work it out. They have failed to do any sort of action on that whatsoever. The only action that they were able to take was the last city council president appointed some other council members to their subcommittee. But beyond that, and maybe like one letter that we responded to that day and have yet to hear anything back on. Beyond that, I really have to say I'm really disappointed in our elected officials and my elected officials and city government. I really hope that they don't delay and waste more time. We can't make a decision on this at the last minute, particularly when it's a service that is so needed. And I think that they can either lead, follow, or get out of the way. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And if only the hashtag do your job wasn't already taken, I think it would apply quite well here. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman.
Mr. Chairman, just real quickly, and just to possibly reiterate some of the things that Dr. Faust and Mr. Brenneman said, everyone just needs to understand, that we, first off, I'm not going to speak for my other colleagues, but people need to understand that we stand very firm in our resolve as to how we feel that this needs to be taken care of, and it does need to become truly regional. And please understand also, many at the city will lead you to believe that we are trying to take something. We're not taking anything. EMTA belongs to Erie County, and we need to get past the city and the county residents. The last time I looked, the city was part of Erie County. We are all one, and it's about doing the right thing. We need to do things smart, we need to do things lean, we need to do things most cost effectively, and this is the right thing to do at the right time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll comment. I concur also with my colleagues. I believe that this is an idea whose time has come. I believe that a rising tide should lift all boats, and I believe that this is a no-brainer. I remain optimistic that in the weeks to come, that things will come into clearer view. And I remain optimistic that our city counterparts, the city administrator, will at least come to the table so that we can move this item, so that we can move it forward. I believe that the operation of EMTA has been honorable and exemplary, as has been the conduct of myself and my colleagues. We've carried ourselves in a honorable way, befitting of the office, and we've been very, very transparent in moving this item forward. And so I'm not here to make an appeal to the citizenry or to the city legislators, but I will say this: a rising tide should lift all boats. I believe that although it's not about operations, it's about funding. We're prepared to take on that responsibility. I think it's a no-brainer, and I believe that September 16th is looming large, and I'm confident, as I just stated, that the city will come to the table, and that we'll be able to sit down, unlike our legislators at the state level, and that we'll be able to get this done. What I don't want to see happen is some type of hysteria in the amongst the citizenry that somehow operations are going to stop, because that's not the case. And so we're going to vote on this ordinance. If there's any other comments, make them now. Other than that, maybe have the roll call for the vote.
On ordinance 19, Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
Yes.
Mrs. Lahl,
Yes.
Mr. Brenneman,
Yes.
Mr. DiMatteo.
Yes.
Chairman Horton.
Yes. Moving on to item 8, new business.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to move to amend tonight's agenda to move ordinances 20 and 21 to second readings.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded by Councilman Brenneman, seconded by Dr. Faust. Any discussion? Roll call for the vote.
Dr. Faust,
Yes.
Mrs. Lahl,
Yes.
Mr. Brenneman.
Yes.
Mr. DiMatteo.
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Chairman Horton.
Yes. Item A, Mr. Smith, could you please read the ordinance number 20 in title only?
A second reading of ordinance number 20 of 2016, first 2016 library fund budget, supplemental appropriation of $33,208 for district data processing line.
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded by Mr. DiMatteo and Dr. Faust. Any questions, comments? Roll call.
On ordinance 20, Mrs. Lahl,
Yes.
Mr. Brenneman.
Yes.
Mr. DiMatteo.
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
Yes.
Chairman Horton.
Yes. Second reading of ordinance number 21 in title only, please.
A second reading of ordinance number 21 of 2016, first 2016 capital projects fund budget, supplemental appropriation of $20,263 and creation of line item from Justice Assistance Grant for Public Safety Radio Project.
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded by Councilman Brenneman and Councilman DiMatteo. Any comments or questions? Roll call.
On ordinance 21, Mr. Brenneman.
Yes.
Mr. DiMatteo.
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
Yes.
Mrs. Lahl,
Yes.
Chairman Horton.
Yes. First reading of ordinance number 22, title only.
A first reading of ordinance number 22 of 2016, ninth 2016 general fund budget, supplemental appropriation of $1,125, and creation of fees line item for county wellness activities.
This is first reading, so we won't vote on that if you're following along. We'll go to item D, possible adoption of resolution number 9.
Erie County Council Resolution Number 9 of 2016, Erie County Hospital Authority, not to exceed $2,800,000, tax exempt note, Dr. Gertrude A. Barber Center, Inc., project.
So moved.
It's been properly moved and seconded by Dr. Faust and Councilman DiMatteo. Any questions, comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. DiMatteo?
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika?
Yes.
Dr. Faust?
Yes.
Mrs. Lahl?
Yes.
Mr. Brenneman?
Yes.
Chairman Horton?
Yes. Okay, item E, possible reappointment of Mrs. Noir, Jerry Noir, to a 4-year term.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Councilman Dr. Faust.
Mr.
and-
Chairman, just very quickly.
Mhm.
As I mentioned earlier, Ms. Nuara represents both my district and Mr. DiMattio's. I've known her for about 4 or 5 years now. I advanced her appointment back then. I think she's done an excellent job. Mrs. Lowell is the liaison to assessment, and I think she said she's probably in line to be the next chairman.
Yes, she
Based
is.
on her activities, so I encourage everybody to vote yes.
Thank you. Any other comments? Roll call?
On the appointment, Mrs. Fatika?
Yes.
Dr. Faust?
Yes.
Mrs. Lahl?
Yes.
Mr. Brenneman?
Yes.
Mr. DiMatteo?
Yes.
Chairman Horton?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the sale of parcels from repository for unsold properties according to the index numbers listed in our agenda tonight.
Second.
Properly moved and second. Dr. Faust, Councilman Brenneman. No questions, answers? Vote.
On the sale of parcels, Dr. Faust?
Yes.
Mrs. Lahl?
Yes.
Mr. Brenneman?
Yes.
Mr. DiMatteo?
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika?
Yes.
Chairman Horton?
Yes.
Move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.